The pounding on my door shook the walls. It wasn't the knock of a neighbor or even a police officer. It was the kind of thunder that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. My wife screamed from the kitchen, my son's terrified voice echoing from upstairs, and when I ripped the door open, I was staring down the barrels of rifles. Full SWAT gear, face shields, boots pounding on the porch. "Step outside. Now!" One of them barked, and before I could ask what was going on, they surged past me, storming up the staircase toward my kid's bedroom. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life. My son was 12 years old, still half asleep in his pajamas, and suddenly there were men with rifles yelling for him to put his hands up. I shouted, trying to explain there must be some mistake, but the team leader's voice cut through. "We have a report of an armed juvenile making threats." My blood went cold. Who in the world would make up something like that? My son had never even touched a real gun. The answer came in the form of a smug, slow-clapping voice drifting in from across the street. Karen, HOA president, neighborhood tyrant, and the kind of woman who could ruin a stranger's day before breakfast, was standing on her porch in her satin robe, holding her phone like a trophy. Her grin was all teeth as she called out, "Just keeping the neighborhood safe." I saw the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes as she watched the chaos unfold, like she just won some sick game. But she didn't know me. She didn't know that before I moved here, I'd served 18 years as a detective in the city's major crimes unit. She didn't know that my best friend, Lieutenant Harris, commanded the very SWAT team she had just weaponized. And she sure as hell didn't know that every single second of this nightmare was being recorded. From the moment the officers hit my porch to the exact second she opened her mouth. I kept my voice steady as I approached Harris. "Who called this in?" I asked. His eyes narrowed. "Anonymous tip. Said there was an active threat at your address." I tilted my head toward Karen, still filming from her porch, and Harris followed my gaze. He didn't need me to say another word. He'd been doing this long enough to recognize the look of someone who thought they were untouchable. By the time the team cleared my house and confirmed there was no weapon, no threat, and no crime, I already had a plan forming in my head. The adrenaline still burned in my veins, but beneath it was something colder, sharper. The knowledge that Karen had just committed a felony. Making a false emergency report that sends armed officers into a home isn't just a prank, it's a crime that can put people in prison for years. And when it's motivated by racial bias, it gets even uglier. I walked straight over to her driveway, Harris right behind me. "You called in a fake SWAT report on my son?" I asked, my voice low but shaking with anger. She smirked like I'd just proven her point. "You people always get so defensive. I was just doing what's best for the community." Harris stepped forward, his voice like ice. "Ma'am, what you did tonight is called swatting. It's a serious offense. People die because of stunts like that." She rolled her eyes, leaning on her porch rail. "Oh, please. The boy was outside with a Nerf gun yesterday. Looked dangerous enough to me." Her words weren't just stupid, they were calculated. She'd seen my kid's skin color and decided that was all the evidence she needed. I took a slow breath. "You made a call that could have gotten my son killed, Karen. You lied to law enforcement. And you think you're walking away from this?" Harris didn't wait for her to answer. He turned to one of his officers and said, "Go ahead and call in a unit to process this." The smirk slid right off her face. "Wait, what? You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." That's when the twist came. A voice from behind her said, "Not anymore, you're not." Edna, the HOA secretary, stepped onto the porch holding a folder thick with papers. "I've been keeping records of your little power trips, Karen. Tonight just gave me the final piece I needed." She handed the folder to Harris. Inside were screenshots, emails, and even audio recordings of Karen bragging about getting rid of certain families in the neighborhood. Karen's voice cracked as two uniformed officers came up the steps. "This is harassment. You're all conspiring against me." But the cuffs clicked shut anyway. Her wrists pulled behind her as Harris read her rights. The neighbors had gathered now, phones out, recording from every angle. And for once, the woman who loved to be the center of attention was powerless to control the story. They walked her down those porch steps like every step was stripping away the years of arrogance she'd built up. The neighborhood had gone utterly silent except for the clicking of cameras and the occasional murmur. Everyone was soaking in the sight of Karen, the self-crowned queen of our street, now stumbling toward the back of a squad car in handcuffs. Her robe had slipped off one shoulder, her hair sticking out in stubborn curls, and the once-practiced smirk had curdled into something raw and panicked. The officers didn't shove her, didn't rush, just the slow, deliberate escort of someone who wanted every second of this to sink in for her and everyone watching. Harris stayed back with me as the car door shut on her protests, his eyes scanning the gathering crowd. "You good?" he asked. I wanted to say yes, but the truth was, my hands were still trembling. My son was sitting inside, pale and quiet, trying to process how bedtime had turned into a raid. "I'll be fine once he's fine," I told him. Harris gave a small nod, the kind you give when you know words won't fix it. The neighbors thought his was their moment too. People who had whispered their complaints in the dark were now speaking up loud and clear. She tried to have my nephew evicted for playing basketball in the driveway. She told me my daughter couldn't sell lemonade without a permit. She called animal control on my dog twice, and he's a therapy dog. The stories spilled out, each one feeding into the next until it was clear this wasn't about just one night. Karen had been waging a quiet little war on anyone she didn't like, and tonight had blown it wide open. The twist that sealed it came 2 days later. I'd expected the local news to maybe run a short piece about a false police call, but instead, a full investigative segment aired. Turns out this wasn't Karen's first swatting. A reporter had dug up records from her last neighborhood, 2 nearly identical 911 calls made from her phone about armed suspects, who turned out to be nothing more than young black men walking home. Those cases had been dropped due to lack of evidence linking her to the calls until now. The footage from my live stream and the audio from Harris's body cam had left no doubt. When the news anchor said, "This time, prosecutors intend to press for the maximum sentence," I swear I heard cheering from somewhere down the block. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that night, and for the first time, it was open to every resident. Edna presided with calm authority, reading out a list of bylaws Karen had violated over the years: conflict of interest, misuse of funds, harassment of residents. Then she announced a unanimous vote to dissolve the board until new elections could be held. You could feel the air get lighter, like someone had cracked a window in a long-sealed room. Karen's trial became a sort of community spectacle. We carpooled to the courthouse, sat in the gallery, and watched as her defense tried and failed to spin the incident into an unfortunate misunderstanding. The prosecutor didn't even have to push hard. The jury only needed to see the body cam footage once. When the guilty verdict came, it wasn't joy I felt, it was relief. Relief that no one else would wake up to the sound of boots on the porch because she decided they didn't belong. After she was sentenced, her house went on the market. The for sale sign stayed up for months. Nobody wanted it, not with the stories attached. Eventually, the bank took it, and a young couple moved in, eager to start fresh. On their first night, they joined the rest of us for something that had quietly become tradition: the Friday night block gathering. No rules about who could sit where, no HOA compliance checks, no petty fines, just folding chairs, shared food, and laughter echoing off the houses. It took a long time for my son to sleep through the night again without flinching at sudden noises. But one evening, as the sun dipped low and the street lamps flickered on, he came out to where we were sitting and said, "Dad, I'm glad we stayed." I looked at him, at our neighbors talking like they'd known each other forever, at the absence of that constant, watchful malice we'd lived under for too long. "Me too, kid," I said. "Me too. Sometimes justice doesn't just remove the problem, it reminds you how a community is supposed to feel. And sometimes the loudest way to win is simply to stand your ground, keep the receipts, and let the truth do the talking. If someone tried to use the law as a weapon against your family, would you stay silent, or would you make sure they were the ones walking away in cuffs?